So, hello. I'm trying to follow up with a conversation about the self-portrait I'm working on that you've seen, and I just want to make a few points. I think you're going to be watching the entirety of this, and we should be looking at it now as we speak. But what I'm showing you here is the way I start a picture, and that's actually to create a composition. So the exits, as I pointed out before, are in place. The top one above the head at the right location, the one down left with the brushes, the elbow bar going out. These are all planned locations, and even the belt line, that's the distance I want it from the bottom of the page. So this is all pre-planned, preset, and all I've worked on in the lay-in here is trying to get the top and bottom, left and right, the anchors, and the color relations as best I can, and do it in the course of one sitting. Now, I prefer to get a little farther than I did, and so what I'm doing now, I'm matching the background color there, by the way, but and that's actually something useful to watch. I hope this isn't going too fast for you. It's a little too fast for me to talk about. Maybe that's good. But you see, I didn't have enough yellow in there. I just threw yellow on top of what was already there. Now I'm putting blue in, or the green. And you see that I'm using the purpler notes at the same value. I'm looking for that overall red, yellow, blue thing to try to find that color match. And then I'm pushing it again into the background, into the head, so that I can draw with the darks. So that's a classic policy. You're drawing with the darks. That doesn't mean you always push in. You'll see me a number of times not. I just simply go and draw with the darks. Uh, and gradually, as you see this head being worked on, you're going to see me just paint, just do things, and then the whole thing eventually will become wet. And at that point, all the edges are the kind of wet and wet edges that I want. So I'm reviewing the top, rebuilding that, trying to find the new location. It's really difficult to do a self-portrait in a mirror. You have to look up each time, and each time you come in, of course, like any other sitter, you have hair issues. Things are different. But I'm reestablishing the top, and you reestablish it with the edge and with the light effect, which is a combination of edge and value contrast plus color contrast, of course. So that's what you're seeing me work on just now. And I'm really not making any attempt to draw the right side of any of this stuff. I don't want to draw too big if that mass coming down there is wider than that. I don't want to make it wrong. But on the other hand, I'm only really trying to get, and really focusing, getting that left edge. I need to have its light effect. I need to have its sharpness of edge. I need it to come off the, that light area in the background is the canvas that theoretically I'll be painting on in the self-portrait. Now remember what we did in this thing, we were all over the place at once in the start. We have all the major effects are established on some level. Not brilliantly in this case. I would like to have done more, spent a little more time on it, but there are some some serious time restrictions, and you have to take what you can get and build from there. But you can see that I have that little bit of a collar thing there, and the edge of the sleeve on the wrist, and even in the far background there's a Japanese screen, and that piece of the screen there, the edge that I need is articulate. That's the location of that square edge over there. Now the reason I picked the face, by the way, is the thing that's least liked because it's one of the busier areas, and it's the last thing I want to work on at the end of a day, because it's a difficult enough thing to do just to get all the elements in there in the course of a single day. But what's missing, as you can see, is this significant big blob of dark slashing across my beard. And various the absence of the dark underplane of the nose and the eye blob itself, and the nose, the bony corner of the nose, those sorts of things. They're all going to be the things I'm pursuing because they're strong in the visual order, and I'm correcting the hair to be right for today's hair. Everything I'm doing here is trying to get the color values right to each other, to get the light effect, to get the values related directly to other values. That mass there is trying to be about the same value as the general value of the shadow side. And I'm trying to get those two together and make the right shape with the right edge where they meet. Every once in a while you see me stuff a middle tone into that lower part of the mustache. And that's simply because that's what's happening. And then so when I cut that sharp edge, it's actually cutting a middle tone, not cutting a light. So that's a proportion issue, moving it further to the right, rather. And that's an alignment that if you have a good alignment of your skull with the top of that exit where the canvas goes out on the top there, that's one of those placements. There's a point angle thing that's going on with the right side of the mouth and the edge of that. And there's a point angle thing going on with a lot of things like that, including the hair mass and that sort of thing. The collar for sure. Any number of these notes are just there trying to be the right color value, and then and you talk about it. As soon as you hit the right color value, you begin to make the assessment of that location of effect. I made some assumptions in this painting, and that is that, and I clarified that when I did the shoulder on that left side, hitting the beard, I made sure I had that where I believed I wanted it. Nothing I'm doing over there is because it's nice to work on, fun to work on, it's strategic. Everything you do at this stage is either for value relationship purposes, light effect purposes, form, it doesn't matter, but it's one of those things, but nothing, or placement and all those things. There I just hit an interesting red note, to red, and I'm now adjusting it with green or whatever, middle tone there. Don't be afraid to hit notes and just adjust them. Anyway, following everything I'm saying to you, what I'm really trying to say is I'm going to treat the head exactly as I treated the entire setup. I'm going to just do the main players, try to get them really well aligned with each other. And I do say players, I just mean effects and the locations of these effects, value contrast, edge, et cetera, and just exactly where they locate in relation to any number of other things. The corner of that mouth would have some alignment then with the collar, if that's still in the same place, which it wasn't, by the way. And the point would line up with the exit at the top again, the edge of the panel, the canvas. There's no thought, even a little thought about a mustache. It's just a note that's wrong over there. So I'm building on a note that actually is, you can't just continue that dark down there and have yourself a good color relation. I have to apologize beforehand. The day gets dark and I keep working and I really shouldn't. And my producer tries to keep it looking good, but it's impossible. And so I wind up with apologies to myself that it doesn't look as good as it looks in person when I get done with that. But I'm going to take it another day. This is what we'd call the second skin. And so every area, like the hand area down in the left corner, that whole area is going to be given a second review. You treat the whole thing at once, the whole area at one time. First checking to make sure all those parts are right to the whole, which we're doing with the color relations and other things up there in that head. Correcting them to the whole in every which way, and then as much as you see the need. That's what I was doing with that left shoulder and the beard. I was trying to get that right in proportion in relation to a number of points. It was a much duller color too. It was a blue day, and I think when I laid that in, it must have been some clouds flying by and so on. When I did that, I was mostly just amusing myself. I wasn't planning to show it to people or to do anything more with it. But I do have plans actually to make a full-sized self-portrait. So this is in the class of what I would call a preliminary study. To me, composition is just everything. If the composition is not exciting, then there's no point in noodling anything up in any way. It really needs that, whatever you want to call that, I don't know. And the word exciting may not be adequate for all purposes, but it's got to have for me, it's got to have some quality. That's something that I have in mind, or that I evolve as I sit there looking. One of the things you're going to notice is I may be doing something like that area of the beard, and immediately you'll see me up in the left corner of the hair. It will be because I find a relationship that has to be adjusted. And it's very, very common that when you find yourself adjusting a location, for example, or a shape, you'll suddenly see it playing to another location or shape that you hadn't picked up before. So there is an adjustment process. You really need to get around and do that whole set of those relationships. When I did that cut right there, I just realized there's a really fun way in which the shoulder and the curve of that mustache go nicely together. There's something about that that I found playful. And I didn't go change the shoulder. The shoulder actually was very adequately the same when I started. This has been slowed down, speeded up to, I think this is probably actually an hour and maybe 40 minutes, or hour and 38 minutes or something like that. And we've reduced it to 30 minutes. When you do a lay-in, your color values may not be right on the money, and you don't really find out more until you, for example, have to make that area over there, in a, what shall we say, in isolation. And at that point, you really have to put your eye all over the place. And at that point, you see how much redder the note is, and you'll see that it's darker. And of course, you're comparing the darks of that shadow side of the face to the darks of the jacket or the blue behind or any other thing. Darks to darks. Don't confuse yourself thinking we're talking about shadows, by the way, even though when we paint a shadow, we paint them flat, and so we're actually aware that it's a shadow. But it's really much more about just values and value relationships, and then what they do when they meet the value next to them, and do they produce the right amount of light when you get the edge right and all that stuff. There's a very interesting transition from the dark on the left side of that skull to a something slightly lighter, like light must be coming through the hair. And you can get caught up in those things and really make hay with them, but you'll lose too much time. And the greater part of what today is for in this area is organizing the area. So it really isn't primarily, and by the way, just as it were, make it look busy. So it isn't primarily, it isn't at all painting noses, mustaches, and those things. It's actually just getting the busy elements in there, getting them organized, and getting that area to look busy, viz all the other busynesses. So the hand area is an area of busyness, and the elbow area or the figure in the background might be considered that whole corner up there. Those are busy areas, but this is the lead area by business. It certainly was the backstrap that had the least going for it. It had the least work evolution, and because it's simply the center of interest, it really requires you to put serious time into it. I would say early and often. Now, not so early that you're not thinking about the whole and really trying to mass the greater game, get the greater distribution and all that sort of stuff to find your composition. But obviously, I left it, running out of time. I left it because I didn't want to rush into it without enough adequate time to go ahead and make it reasonably like. I'm using rounds. I mostly do use rounds. I use 3 different brushes here, maybe a 4th one, but I think 3. A dark, middle tone, and a light. It's usually all you need if you have a rag in your hand, which I do. You see that picture? That gray down in the bottom there left is going to be a rag. And behind that, the bluer note is actually a painting on the floor. It's considerably darker. It's going to wind up going away. Remember, they were painting the impression, but it has to be very articulate to make a likeness of, the locations of things have to be articulate. The light effects have to be articulate, and yet we're not into this. You see, we're putting down a mark and leaving it mostly, make a couple strokes possibly. But primarily the idea is to get the effect, to do the job about location. And then in the third skin, you can really bring, say, that piece of the nose that I'm working on there, you can really manage that area one at a time, depending on how much you want. I say an area at a time, much more so, depending on how far you want to evolve this thing in terms of the littleness of detail, which is a thing dictated best, I find, by an idea that you've evolved in relation to your subject. A lot of people that's what they do. They just make everything literally worked out. Most painters probably do. It's just what they're comfortable with. But I like to stay open to the greater music. I see myself working on these notes and they look like they have color in them, and later on in this video, they're going to look just like I totally didn't even see the color. So it's just the light goes away, so I hope you can overlook that. I sort of try to defend myself there, right? I can't prove to you anything about skill or anything like that in this kind of a demonstration. I mean, there's some level of it, but it's much more about what I'm working on. If you can notice what I'm working on and what I'm doing with what I'm working on. So when I go to a spot, like I have to make that edge of the nose and trying to locate it, it's much more, the location thing is very important. And then the delivery of that first look, what I call a summary statement about what it's actually doing visually. And all that stuff is anything except noodling. It's never done by noodling. It's done by large suggestion. And so people, and not suggestion in a weak drawing sense. So it does suggest the form, as you can see that on the nose. It's not articulate in a fine sense, but it suggests the form, which is all you need as you get around this painting. Areas that are formy should look formy, and they should play to the other forms in the painting, etc. Oh, I missed that. I know I was working on something down in the bottom right. I think it was the beard, and I suddenly realized there's a very interesting relationship between that hair group up there, as it's working today, by the way. And my hair is definitely wildly different this day. Now, Gamble used to talk about that movable feast, and he would insist that we actually change the hair. At least he did with me, and I did. I got myself comfortable with changing it every time in. And you find that if you do that, you'll have the visual sense of things. Well said. And you'll get used to, what I mean to say is you'll have the visual sense of things always in front of you. But if you don't move the hair, you'll be saying, but the hair was doing something else. But the hair was, so pretty soon you're not even watching. You don't even include those players in significant ways, in the ways in which they're significantly different. You really need to. Someday you may come back and put the hair in a different place. But for now, that's really quite important that you bring the hair into conformity with today's hair. Unless it's really a total mess. And actually, my hair was, I thought, more interesting, considerably more interesting in this and what was going on today. Now, this is actually probably, I probably should have stopped here with the light going away, but, and I'll probably have to rework some of those areas in a big way because of what happens. But you can see that the larger amount of information is really already there, right? That's most of what I need. So now you see I could go down and work in that fuzzy left corner where the hand meets the cloth, or evolve the other hand a little bit better instead of working up here. But I was determined, sometimes that can get in your way. I was determined to actually, to ultimately to rework the entire area for you. And demonstrations actually can be, can be problematical in sense of it being interfering sometime with what you would actually do yourself if you were not trying to show something, you see. On the other hand, I'm not much trying to show. I'm trying really just to stay within myself here. Anyway, all over the place at once in the start, classic stuff. All over the place at once, but also all the elements at once. So one minute you're correcting a color note, another one you're correcting an effect, another time it's a placement thing. And so it is. And as you watch the thing, this is the thing, keep your eyes wide open, enjoy the thing, but as a flat phenomena, right? And just let yourself see, and just be anywhere. If you're being relational, you'll find yourself somewhere and you'll find a need to be somewhere else because of what just happened there, because of what you just picked up there. It's interesting. I've never done this before. I never watched. I mean, I did The Violinist, but I still never watched that thing. So I've never actually watched myself work. But I could actually see how a person doing this could, I guess, like sports guys do today, find better practices. Find ways to find things you're doing. As I said, I could have stopped this earlier, gotten out of this area for now. And those kinds of things are not unusual. It's not unusual for that sort of a thing to turn up. So I think I've shown you enough. I think that's solid. Of course, it's about a likeness, but it's when you're doing yourself, it takes a little bit of watching and that sort of thing. I toward the end of this thing, I adjusted the eye down a little bit, and that's the kind of stuff that's available to you while you're wet into wet. I don't think I get to it in the. I think I ran out of literally. I ran out of video time, ran out of video space. So on my card, my video card. Um, so you won't see that. Yeah, that's where I saw the need to actually have a better light effect. I do recall that now. The light effect, literally, where the hair meets the canvas back in the background, and exactly what that does by way of a feeling of light. Remember, everything we do, none of this is real, actual colors. This is all color. I mean, they're actual in their relationships, but it's just the set of the color notes as they relate to each other, the set of the effects as they relate to each other, which is why we talk about visual order, because there's the order of the effects. The strong effects is what you set up when you first laid this thing in, and everything else is secondary. On some level, secondary, and it knows who to be because of your anchoring mentality there. So yeah, try to just try to get this by osmosis. That's all I can tell you. Just but don't think what I'm doing is trying in any way to be flashy or anything like that. I'm trying to put down a note and leave. You have to be very precise in your marks. You have to have done a very precise assessment and have a very precise concept in your mind before you go up there with a stroke. And you have to use your palette well and match the color well. And you also have to have just generally good behaviors.